I walked into that boardroom to save my company. I didn't expect to meet the man who would destroy my career and steal my heart. You lie as beautifully as I do. Maybe that's why this works. A fake merger, a forbidden romance, and a lie that grew too big to undo. The Manhattan skyline glittered through floor-to-ceiling windows as tech moguls and venture capitalists mingled with champagne flutes, their conversations worth billions. Catherine Blake adjusted her black blazer, steeling herself for another night of pretending her company wasn't hemorrhaging money. She spotted her target, Marcus Chen, the investor who could save Blake Analytics from bankruptcy, across the crowded rooftop terrace. Just as she began weaving through the crowd, a warm hand touched her elbow. "Catherine Blake," a deep voice said behind her. What a pleasant surprise. She turned to find piercing gray eyes and a smile that screamed trouble. Julian Hartley, tech royalty. Everything she'd worked to build, he'd inherited on a silver platter. "Do we know each other?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "We do now." His grip lingered a moment too long. "And you were about to make a terrible mistake with Chen over there. Trust me." Catherine's pulse quickened, partly from annoyance, partly from something else entirely. Julian Hartley was exactly the kind of entitled heir she despised, so why was her skin burning where he'd touched her? Julian watched her process his warning, fascinated by the fire in her dark eyes. He'd seen her photo in Forbes, but pictures hadn't captured the way she commanded space, or how her intelligence radiated like heat. She was nothing like the vapid socialites in his usual circles. "And why would you help me?" Catherine challenged. "Maybe I'm not." His smile turned wolfish. "Maybe I just wanted an excuse to talk to you." "How refreshingly honest," Catherine said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Let me guess. You've heard about my little company and want to add it to your collection?" Julian laughed, a rich sound that made her stomach flutter traitorously. "Your little company has been outperforming our analytics division for 3 quarters running. I'd hardly call that little." Heat rose in her cheeks. He'd been watching her work. "Flattery will get you nowhere, Hartley. Good thing I wasn't flattering you." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I was stating facts. Your predictive algorithms are revolutionary. Your client retention rate is unmatched. And right now, you're the most interesting person in this room." Catherine's breath caught. This wasn't the conversation she'd expected. "What do you want?" "To buy you a drink. To hear about your work. To understand how someone builds an empire from nothing while I inherited mine." His honesty felt dangerous. "What do you want, Catherine?" "Everything," she thought. "Your connections, your resources, your ability to write checks with more zeros than I'll see in a lifetime." Out loud, she said, "To survive another quarter. Survival is overrated," Julian murmured. "What about thriving?" Catherine studied his face, searching for the calculated charm she expected from corporate royalty. Instead, she found genuine curiosity and something that looked almost like loneliness. "You don't know anything about surviving, do you? Everything's been handed to you on a platinum platter." "You're right," Julian admitted, surprising her. "I've never had to fight for anything. Never had to prove myself beyond my last name. But watching you, reading about what you've built, it makes me wonder what I could accomplish if I actually had to earn it." "Careful," Catherine warned, taking a step back. That almost sounded like respect. It was respect. His gray eyes held hers, mixed with a healthy dose of envy. "You turned $20,000 and a Columbia dorm room into a multi-million-dollar company. I turned $1 billion inheritance into slightly more billions. Which of us is really impressive?" The vulnerability in his voice caught her off guard. She'd expected arrogance, manipulation, the entitled confidence of someone who'd never heard no. Instead, Julian Hartley was looking at her like she held secrets to a life worth living. Before she could respond, he was signaling the bartender. 2 whiskey sours. Top shelf. I don't drink during business hours. Good thing this isn't business." His eyes never left hers. Yet, that single word hung between them, loaded with possibility and threat. Catherine felt the familiar calculation starting in her mind. What could she gain from this conversation? What advantages might Julian offer? But his unexpected honesty made her usual strategies feel cheap and obvious. "Besides," Julian continued, accepting the drinks from the bartender, "I have it on good authority that your business hours ended 2 hours ago. Sarah mentioned you've been working 18-hour days trying to secure Series B funding." Catherine's eyes sharpened. You've been talking to my CFO? My assistant reached out to schedule this conversation properly. Your sister was protective. Julian's smile turned rueful. She hung up on me twice before agreeing to pass along a message. And what message was that? That Julian Hartley requests the honor of 5 minutes with the brilliant Catherine Blake to discuss mutually beneficial opportunities. He handed her the whiskey sour, though I suspect she edited out several choice adjectives. Despite herself, Catherine felt her lips twitch. Sarah had probably called him far worse than whatever sanitized version he'd received. My sister doesn't trust easily. Smart woman. Neither do you, I imagine. Catherine took a sip of the whiskey sour, buying time to study him. The drink was perfect. Not too sweet, with just enough bite. Even his drink orders were calculated to impress. To worthy opponents, he said, raising his glass. To knowing when you're outmatched, she countered, touching her glass to his. The crystal rang like a bell between them, and Catherine couldn't shake the feeling she'd just made a deal with the devil himself. But as Julian's eyes crinkled with genuine amusement at her toast, she wondered if the devil might be more complicated than she'd imagined. Catherine's corner office overlooked the Hudson River, but the view couldn't distract from the red numbers glowing on her laptop screen. Blake Analytics was 3 months from bankruptcy, and every fake smile at networking events brought her closer to complete collapse. Her assistant knocked, announcing another creditor's call. Tell them I'm in meetings all week, Catherine said, her voice steady despite the panic clawing at her chest. She'd built this company from her Columbia dorm room, and she'd be damned if she'd watch it die because she couldn't secure funding fast enough. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent 5 years creating algorithms that predicted market failures, yet she hadn't seen her own coming until it was too late. The expansion into European markets had drained their reserves just as 3 major clients delayed payments. Now she was hemorrhaging money faster than she could raise it, and the sharks were circling. Catherine pulled up the spreadsheet she'd hidden from her board. 6 weeks of operating capital left, maybe 8 if she laid off half the engineering team. The thought made her physically ill. These weren't just employees. They were brilliant minds who'd believed in her vision, who'd taken pay cuts to join a startup led by a 27-year-old nobody from Ohio. Her phone buzzed. A text from Julian. Dinner tonight? I have a proposition. She stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. Julian Hartley didn't make propositions lightly. In the 3 weeks since their first meeting, he'd been the perfect gentleman. Dinners at expensive restaurants where he asked thoughtful questions about her work. Flowers delivered to her office with notes about articles he thought she'd find interesting. Invitations to gallery openings and charity galas that put Blake Analytics in front of potential investors. Catherine wasn't naive. She knew he was cultivating her, building a relationship that would benefit Hartley Global somehow. The question was whether she could use his interest to save her company, before he realized how desperate she truly was. Every dinner was a chess match where both players pretended not to be calculating 3 moves ahead. What kind of proposition? She typed back. The kind that's better discussed over wine and excellent food. Masa, 8 p.m., Masa, where dinner for 2 cost more than most people's monthly rent. Catherine closed her laptop. Decision made. If Julian Hartley wanted to buy her expensive meals while she figured out how to survive, she'd let him. 20 blocks north, Julian stared at the acquisition report his father had commissioned. Blake Analytics was worth more gutted than operational. Their proprietary algorithms could be integrated into Hartley Global's existing infrastructure, eliminating competition while absorbing their innovation. She'll never see it coming, his father, Richard Hartley, said from behind his mahogany desk. Court her, gain her trust, make her think she's winning. Julian's jaw tightened. She's brilliant, Dad. Her work could revolutionize. Her work will revolutionize our bottom line, once we own it. Richard's smile was cold steel. Unless you're having second thoughts about proving yourself worthy of this company, the threat was clear. Julian had spent years trying to earn his father's respect, to prove he was more than just a trust fund baby coasting on inherited wealth. He'd graduated summa cum laude from Wharton, earned an MBA from Stanford, spent 2 years in London learning international markets. None of it had been enough to convince his father that he deserved to inherit Hartley Global based on merit rather than bloodline. This acquisition would be different. It would demonstrate Julian's ability to identify undervalued assets, build strategic relationships, and execute complex deals. Catherine Blake represented everything his father respected: innovation, determination, and the kind of hunger that built empires. So why did the thought of deceiving her make his stomach turn? Julian opened his desk drawer and pulled out the background report his security team had compiled. Catherine's parents were middle-class immigrants who'd worked multiple jobs to put their daughters through college. Her father still drove the same Honda he'd bought 15 years ago. Her mother sent care packages filled with homemade cookies to Catherine's office every month. The report painted a picture of someone who'd earned every success through relentless work and sacrifice. Someone who'd be destroyed by the kind of corporate maneuvering his father considered standard business practice. Time is money, Julian, Richard continued. Every day we delay gives her more opportunity to secure alternative funding. Strike while she's vulnerable. Vulnerable. Julian's hands clenched into fists. His father spoke about Catherine like she was prey to be hunted, not a brilliant entrepreneur who'd built something remarkable from nothing. No second thoughts. Julian lied, already composing his reply to her text. But as he typed the invitation to Masa, one of the most expensive restaurants in the city, chosen deliberately to demonstrate his resources, he wondered if he was saving Catherine's company or delivering it to slaughter. His phone rang. Catherine accepting his dinner invitation. Her voice sounded tired, stressed in a way that made him want to offer comfort instead of deception. When she hung up, Julian stared at the acquisition documents spread across his desk and felt like he was planning a betrayal that would haunt him forever. You're playing with fire, Kat. Sarah Blake, Catherine's younger sister and CFO, dropped a stack of legal documents on the conference table. Julian Hartley doesn't date competitors. He destroys them. Catherine didn't look up from her laptop. It's not dating. It's strategy. 3 dinners this week isn't strategy. It's infatuation. Sarah's voice sharpened. We need investors, not distractions. Especially not distractions who could buy and sell us before breakfast. Sarah pulled out her tablet, swiping through a presentation she'd clearly been preparing for this conversation. Look at this, Kat. Every company Julian has been romantically linked to in the past 3 years. She displayed a timeline with photos and headlines. Rebecca Chen, founder of Health Tech Solutions, acquired by Hartley Global 6 months after they started dating. Maria Santos, CEO of Green Data, merged into Hartley's environmental division after an 8-month relationship. Should I continue? Catherine's fingers stilled on her keyboard. That's circumstantial evidence. Is it? Because I did some digging into Hartley Global's acquisition strategy. They have a whole department dedicated to what they call relationship-based market entry. Corporate seduction, Kat. It's literally their business model. Julian isn't his father's company, Catherine said, but her voice lacked conviction. Sarah leaned forward, her expression softening. I know you like him. Hell, I can see why. He's charming, gorgeous, and he looks at you like you hung the moon. But remember what Mom always said. When something seems too good to be true, it usually is. Which is exactly why I need to understand what he wants, Catherine snapped. Keep your enemies closer, remember? And what if he's thinking the same thing? Sarah challenged. What if you're both playing the same game, and the only question is who gets played first? The thought had kept Catherine awake for 3 nights running. Every text from Julian, every casual touch during dinner, every moment of apparent vulnerability. Was any of it real? Or was she being expertly manipulated by a man who'd inherited the art of corporate warfare along with his trust fund? But late at night, when Julian's texts made her smile despite herself, Catherine wondered who was really being kept close. Meanwhile, across town in the mahogany-paneled dining room of the Yale Club, Richard Hartley's patience was wearing thin. The merger proposal should have been finalized weeks ago, he told Julian during their weekly breakfast. What's the delay? Due diligence takes time, Julian said carefully, cutting his eggs Benedict with surgical precision. We want to ensure we're not missing any liabilities. The only liability I see is your growing attachment to that woman. Richard's fork clinked against his plate. Don't mistake business for pleasure, son. It's a weakness I won't tolerate. Julian's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. My personal feelings don't affect my professional judgment, don't they? Richard pulled out his phone, scrolling to a gossip blog. Because according to Manhattan Social Scene, you've been seen with Miss Blake 7 times in 3 weeks. That's either exceptional dedication to the acquisition process or a concerning loss of perspective. Around them, the Yale Club hummed with quiet conversations between men who'd shaped American business for generations. Julian had grown up in these rooms, learning that relationships were currency and sentiment was suicide. His father's lesson had always been clear. Use whatever leverage you had, whether it was money, connections, or charm. The target's feelings were irrelevant. "She's more complicated than we anticipated," Julian said finally. "Catherine Blake isn't just brilliant. She's suspicious. If I move too fast, she'll see through the approach. Or you're rationalizing because you enjoy her company too much." Richard's smile was arctic. "Remember, Julian, this isn't just about one acquisition. The board is watching how you handle this situation. Your future leadership of Hartley Global depends on proving you can make hard decisions when emotions complicate business." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Julian had 2 older cousins who'd love to inherit the company if he proved himself unworthy. His father had spent decades building Hartley Global into a tech empire. He wouldn't hesitate to pass over his own son if Julian showed weakness. "I understand completely," Julian said, though the eggs Benedict tasted like ash in his mouth. The morning gossip columns didn't help matters. "Tech's hottest power couple?" screamed the headline, featuring a paparazzi shot of Julian and Catherine leaving a Soho restaurant, their hands almost touching as they walked. The article speculated wildly about a potential merger between their companies, calling them the ultimate power couple of Silicon Alley, and the romance that could reshape the tech landscape. Catherine's phone rang immediately after the story broke. "Have you seen page 6? Her PR manager asked, his voice tight with panic. "This is either brilliant marketing or corporate suicide." "Define brilliant marketing," Catherine said dryly, staring at the photo. She looked happy in it, genuinely happy in a way she barely recognized anymore. When had she last smiled like that? "Well, Blake Analytics stock is up 12% this morning on speculation about a Hartley partnership. But if this relationship goes south, you'll be seen as the woman who let emotion compromise her business judgment. The optics are complicated." Sarah appeared in Catherine's doorway, holding up her own copy of the newspaper. "So much for keeping things low-key," she mouthed. As Julian read the same article from his corner office overlooking Central Park, he realized the lie was growing beyond their control. The media attention meant every move would be scrutinized, every dinner dissected, every gesture analyzed for signs of romance or corporate intrigue. They were trapped in a performance neither had planned, forced to play lovers while harboring secrets that could destroy them both. His assistant buzzed the intercom. "Mr. Hartley, your father is on line 1. He says it's urgent." Julian stared at the newspaper photo, at Catherine's radiant smile, and his own unguarded expression. In that captured moment, they looked like what everyone assumed them to be, 2 people falling genuinely, desperately in love. The irony was that somewhere between the lies and the strategy, that assumption was becoming dangerously close to the truth. "You're stalling," Catherine said, cutting into her salmon with surgical precision. They were at Le Bernardin, their 5th dinner in 2 weeks, and the pretense of discussing business was wearing thin. Julian set down his wineglass. "Maybe I am." The admission hung between them like a challenge. Around them, other diners conducted their own elaborate dances of power and seduction, but Catherine felt suddenly alone with him in the crowded restaurant. "Why?" she asked. "Because once we sign papers, everything changes." His gray eyes darkened. "Right now we're just 2 people having dinner. Tomorrow we could be partners, or enemies. What makes you think we're not enemies already?" But her voice lacked conviction. Julian reached across the table, his fingers finding hers. "Enemies don't look at each other the way you're looking at me right now." Heat rushed through Catherine's veins. She should pull away, maintain professional distance. Instead, she let him trace patterns on her palm with his thumb. The simple touch sent electricity up her arm, making her hyper-aware of everything about him. The way his shirt stretched across his shoulders, the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the intensity in his gaze that made her feel like the only woman in the world. "This is insane. We barely know each other," she whispered. "I know you take your coffee black because you think adding cream is admitting weakness," Julian said quietly. "I know you check your phone exactly every 7 minutes when you're nervous. I know you bite your lip when you're thinking. And right now you're thinking about whether to let me kiss you." Catherine's breath caught. He was right. About all of it. "You're very observant. Only when it matters." He stood, offering his hand. "Let me show you something." The rational part of Catherine's mind screamed warnings. This was Julian Hartley, heir to a corporate empire, a man who could destroy her company with a phone call. But the way he looked at her, like she was precious and dangerous and utterly fascinating, made rationality seem overrated. Against her better judgment, Catherine followed him to the elevator. The ride to her building was charged with tension, neither speaking as they watched the floors tick by. Julian's presence filled the small space, making her acutely aware of his proximity, the way his cologne mixed with something uniquely him. On the rooftop of her building, Manhattan sparkled below them like a circuit board come to life. The city that had made them both, her through ambition and grit, him through birthright and expectation, spread out in glittering testimony to the power of dreams and determination. "I lied," he said suddenly, breaking the spell of the view. Catherine's heart stopped. "About what?" "About why I keep asking you to dinner." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "It's not strategy. It's not business. It's because I can't stop thinking about you." The confession hung between them, raw and honest in a way that made Catherine's chest tight. She'd expected many things from Julian Hartley: charm, manipulation, corporate maneuvering. She hadn't expected vulnerability that cut straight to her heart. "Julian," she started, but he shook his head. "Let me finish. I think about you when I'm in board meetings. I wonder what you'd say about the deals we're discussing, whether you'd approve of the decisions I make. I find myself buying books you've mentioned just to understand what interests you. I've never done that before. Centered my thoughts around someone else's opinions." Catherine felt her carefully constructed defenses crumbling. "This is dangerous for both of us." "I know." His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "But I can't seem to care anymore." Before she could respond, his lips were on hers, soft and demanding and perfect. Catherine melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as he pulled her closer. The kiss tasted like wine and possibility, and everything she'd been denying she wanted. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, foreheads pressed together as the city hummed around them. "What are we doing?" Catherine whispered. "Something that's going to change everything," Julian replied, and kissed her again. When they broke apart, reality crashed back like cold water. Catherine stepped away, her hand flying to her lips. We can't do this." "Why not?" Julian's voice was rough with desire. "Because you're Julian Hartley and I'm—" She gestured helplessly. "This is a mistake. Some mistakes are worth making." But Catherine was already backing toward the stairwell, her heart hammering against her ribs. The kiss had been everything she'd imagined and more. Tender, yet demanding. Intimate in a way that terrified her. She could still taste him, still feel the heat of his hands on her face. "I need time to think." "Catherine, wait." Julian reached for her, but she was already through the door, her heels echoing in the concrete stairwell as she fled to the safety of her apartment. Inside, Catherine pressed her back against the door, breathing hard. What was she doing? She'd built her entire career on calculated risks and careful planning. Julian Hartley was neither calculated nor careful. He was dangerous, unpredictable, the kind of complication that could destroy everything she'd worked for. But God, the way he'd looked at her, like she was the answer to questions he'd never known he was asking. Her phone buzzed. A text from Julian. "Are you okay? I'm sorry if I pushed too hard." Catherine stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She could text back, could try to explain the tangle of fear and desire warring in her chest. Instead, she turned off her phone and went to bed, where she lay awake until dawn thinking about gray eyes and gentle hands, and the way Julian had said her name like a prayer. The next morning brought an anonymous email to Catherine's personal account. "He's not what he seems. Ask him about project acquisition. Ask him what his father really wants." Catherine stared at the message, her coffee growing cold. Project acquisition. The name meant nothing to her, but the timing felt deliberate. Someone wanted her to distrust Julian, and that someone had access to inside information. She read the email 3 times, looking for clues about the sender. The message came from a generic Gmail account created just hours earlier. No signature, no identifying information. But whoever sent it knew about her relationship with Julian, knew enough about Hartley Global's internal operations to reference specific projects. Her finger hovered over the delete button. This could be corporate espionage, a competitor trying to sabotage whatever was developing between Blake Analytics and Hartley Global. Or it could be someone trying to warn her about something genuinely dangerous. The kiss from last night felt suddenly tainted. Had Julian been playing her all along? Was every vulnerable moment, every tender confession, Part of some elaborate corporate seduction? Then she forwarded the email to her personal investigator instead. Marcus Chen had worked for Catherine for 3 years, specializing in corporate intelligence and due diligence. If there was something to find about project acquisition, he'd find it. Need everything you can dig up on this, she typed. Priority 1. And Marcus? Keep this completely confidential. Meanwhile, across town, Julian was facing his own crisis of conscience. His father's deadline loomed. The acquisition proposal was due by month's end, just 2 weeks away. But every moment with Catherine made the deception feel more like betrayal. She was brilliant, passionate, vulnerable beneath her armor of confidence. She deserved better than his lies. Julian stared at the documents spread across his mahogany desk. Financial projections, integration timelines, personnel reduction plans. Catherine's company reduced to spreadsheets and profit margins. Her employees, people with families, mortgages, dreams, labeled as redundant assets to be eliminated post-acquisition. His stomach turned. This wasn't business strategy. It was destruction, disguised as progress. His office door opened without a knock. The only person who dared such presumption was his father. Richard Hartley entered with the confidence of a man who'd never met a door he couldn't open, a deal he couldn't close, or a competitor he couldn't crush. "I trust last night went well?" Richard asked, settling into the leather chair across from Julian's desk. "The photographers certainly got some beautiful shots of you two on that rooftop." Julian's blood ran cold. "You had us followed?" "I have investments to protect," Richard said smoothly. "And my son's romantic entanglements affect those investments." The kiss was nicely done, by the way. Very convincing. The casual way his father discussed the most intimate moment of Julian's life made him feel physically ill. It wasn't for show, wasn't it? Richard's smile was sharp as winter. "Because from where I sit, you're playing your role perfectly. The acquisition timeline is on track. The target is emotionally compromised, and you're positioned to close this deal ahead of schedule." "She's not a target," Julian said through gritted teeth. "Her name is Catherine, and she's a means to an end," Richard finished. "Nothing more, nothing less. Don't confuse the performance with reality, Julian. That way lies weakness." After his father left, Julian's phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. "Need to focus on work for a while. Thank you for dinner." The formal tone felt like a door slamming shut. Julian stared at the message, then at the half-finished acquisition documents on his desk. Catherine was pulling away, and he couldn't blame her. He'd kissed her while planning to destroy everything she'd built. He'd held her like she was precious while preparing to betray her trust in the most devastating way possible. For the first time in his life, Julian wondered if his father's approval was worth the price he'd have to pay. The answer, he realized with growing horror, was becoming clearer with every breath. Catherine was 3 slides into her presentation when the conference room door opened. Every head turned as Julian Hartley entered, his presence commanding immediate attention. The potential investors, men who'd been politely skeptical moments before, suddenly sat straighter. "Sorry I'm late," Julian said smoothly, taking the empty chair at the head of the table. "I couldn't miss Catherine's presentation." Catherine's carefully rehearsed words died in her throat. What was he doing here? This was her pitch, her last chance to save Blake Analytics without surrendering control. "Mr. Hartley," stammered Gerald Morrison, the lead investor, "we weren't expecting you." "Blake Analytics is the most innovative data company in the city," Julian said, his eyes finding Catherine's. "I wouldn't want to miss the opportunity to support true innovation." Heat flooded Catherine's cheeks. He was sabotaging her pitch, or saving it. She couldn't tell which. "As I was saying," she continued, finding her rhythm again, "our predictive algorithms have achieved 94% accuracy in market forecasting." Julian leaned forward, asking intelligent questions that showcased her expertise. By the time she finished, the investors were practically writing checks, but Catherine barely noticed their enthusiasm. All she could see was Julian's proud smile, the way he'd made her shine instead of stealing her spotlight. "That was," she began, when they were alone. "Impressive," Julian suggested. "Revolutionary? Worth investing in? Manipulative," she finished, but her tone was gentle. "Why did you do that?" "Because you deserve to be heard," he said simply. "And because He stopped, seeming to wrestle with something. "Have dinner with me tonight, please." Catherine knew she should say no. The anonymous email still haunted her thoughts, and her investigator hadn't reported back yet. But the way Julian had supported her had made her feel powerful instead of diminished, made her want to trust him. "One dinner," she agreed, "but this time, we're talking about everything." That night, in the intimate booth at their favorite wine bar, defenses crumbled like sugar in rain. Julian told her about the pressure of living up to the Hartley name, the constant need to prove himself worthy. Catherine admitted her company was struggling, that every confident facade hid desperate fear. "I built this company to prove I was more than my background," she whispered. "My parents cleaned offices in buildings like yours. I used to watch through the windows, dreaming of sitting in those boardrooms someday." Julian's hand covered hers. "And now you own the boardroom. For now." Her laugh was hollow. "If I can't secure funding soon, you will," Julian said fiercely. "You're too brilliant to fail." When he walked her home, the city lights blurring around them, Catherine felt something shift. This wasn't the predatory heir she'd imagined. This was a man as trapped by expectations as she was, fighting his own battles behind designer suits and practiced smiles. At her door, he cupped her face in his hands. "I meant what I said on the rooftop. I can't stop thinking about you." This time, when he kissed her, Catherine didn't pull away. Julian's penthouse apartment was a shrine to minimalist luxury, but Catherine barely noticed the stunning views or expensive art. They'd talked until dawn, sharing fears and dreams between heated kisses and gentle touches. Now, wrapped in his shirt, she watched him make coffee with the same precision he brought to everything else. "Your father expects you at the office," she said, reading over his shoulder as his phone lit up with messages. Julian's jaw tightened. "My father expects a lot of things." "Such as?" For a moment, Julian looked like he might tell her everything. Then his mask slipped back into place. The usual: profit margins, market expansion, making the family name proud. Catherine sensed the lie but didn't push. Everyone was entitled to their secrets. God knew she had enough of her own. What she didn't see was Julian's other phone, hidden in his jacket pocket, buzzing with increasingly urgent messages from Richard Hartley. "The board is asking questions. Where's the acquisition proposal?" Miles away, Catherine's investigator was finally making progress. Project Acquisition wasn't just a name. It was Hartley Global's code for hostile takeovers, and Blake Analytics was next on the list. Meanwhile, Sarah Blake was conducting her own investigation into Julian's motives. The financial records she'd pulled painted a troubling picture. Every company Julian had courted in the past year had been absorbed into Hartley Global within 6 months. "He's a corporate predator," she told her reflection in the bathroom mirror, practicing the speech she'd give Catherine. "And my sister is his next meal." But Sarah didn't know about the reports Julian had been burying, the acquisition timelines he kept pushing back, or the way he'd started questioning every order from his father. She also didn't know that Richard Hartley had hired a private investigator of his own, one whose photos of Julian leaving Catherine's apartment would arrive on his desk within the hour. The call came while Catherine was reviewing contracts in her office. Julian's voice was strained, professional in a way that made her stomach clench. "We need to talk," he said. "Are you free for lunch?" An hour later, sitting across from him at a sterile midtown cafe, Catherine knew something had changed. Julian looked like he hadn't slept, his usually perfect appearance slightly disheveled. "I have something to show you," he said, sliding a tablet across the table. Catherine's blood turned to ice as she read the headline: Hartley Global launches competitive analytics division. The article detailed a new subsidiary that sounded suspiciously similar to Blake Analytics' core services. "When?" she asked, her voice deadly quiet. "The announcement went live this morning. I had no idea." "Bullshit." Catherine's composure cracked like glass. "You've been planning this, all of it. The dinners, the support at my pitch, She couldn't finish. The night they'd spent together felt suddenly sordid, a transaction disguised as intimacy. "Catherine, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" "How you played me." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "How you got me to trust you while you were copying my business model." "It's not like that." "Then what is it like, Julian?" Her voice carried across the cafe, drawing stares. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you used me as bait while you built a better mousetrap." Julian's face went pale. "You think I would use you like that?" "I think you're a Hartley," Catherine said, the name like poison on her tongue. And Hartleys take what they want no matter who gets destroyed in the process. She left him sitting there, surrounded by the wreckage of whatever they'd been building. By the time she reached her office, her hands were shaking with rage and something deeper, the devastating realization that she'd fallen for him completely, just in time to discover it was all a lie. Julian didn't follow her. He couldn't, because everything she'd accused him of was partially true. He had been planning to acquire her company. He had copied elements of her business model. The only thing she'd gotten wrong was thinking he could ever use her heart as a weapon. But sitting in that cafe, watching her walk away, Julian realized that the truth might be even worse than her accusations. Because somewhere between the first lie and the last kiss, he'd fallen in love with the woman he was supposed to destroy. The Hartley Global Board meeting was supposed to be routine. Quarterly reports, budget approvals, the usual corporate theater. Julian sat at the massive mahogany table, barely listening to his father's presentation about market expansion and strategic acquisitions. His mind was still on Catherine, on the way she'd looked at him like he was everything she despised. Which brings us to our most promising acquisition target, Richard Hartley continued, clicking to the next slide. Blake Analytics. Julian's head snapped up. On the projection screen, Catherine's company logo filled the wall, surrounded by financial projections and integration timelines. As you can see, Richard continued, their current financial distress makes them ripe for acquisition. My son has been cultivating a relationship with their CEO to facilitate a smooth transition. The words hit Julian like physical blows. Around the table, board members nodded approvingly, discussing Catherine's company like a piece of meat to be carved up. They had no idea who she was, what she'd built, how brilliant and fierce and beautiful she was. The plan, Richard said, his smile sharp as a blade, is to complete the acquisition within 30 days, then integrate their algorithms into our existing platform. We estimate a 40% cost reduction by eliminating redundant personnel. Catherine's entire team, the people she'd fought to protect, reduced to a line item on a spreadsheet. Julian stood abruptly, his chair rolling backward. No. The boardroom fell silent. Richard's eyes narrowed dangerously. Excuse me? I said no. Julian's voice grew stronger with each word. We're not acquiring Blake Analytics. We're not destroying Catherine's company for parts. And I'm done being your puppet. Sit down, Julian. You're embarrassing yourself. The only thing that embarrasses me is this. Julian gestured at the presentation. Using people's hearts as leverage. Destroying innovation instead of fostering it. I won't be part of it anymore. Richard's facade cracked, revealing the cold calculation beneath. Then you're no longer part of this company. Good, Julian said, already moving toward the door, because this isn't the company I want to inherit. He left behind 30 years of expectations, a fortune in stock options, and the only life he'd ever known. But all he could think about was getting to Catherine before she saw the news, before she learned the full extent of his family's betrayal from some corporate journalist who would never understand what it meant. He was too late. Catherine was in her office when her assistant knocked urgently. Ms. Blake, there's a reporter on line 1. She says it's about Julian Hartley and something called project acquisition. The blood drained from Catherine's face. Put her through. Ms. Blake, this is Jennifer Walsh from TechCrunch. I'm calling for comment on the leaked Hartley Global documents showing your company was targeted for a hostile acquisition. Were you aware that Julian Hartley was gathering intelligence on Blake Analytics for his father's buyout plan? The words hit Catherine like a physical assault. What documents? Internal emails and presentations detailing a strategy to court you personally as a way to gain access to your company's vulnerabilities. One email from Richard Hartley specifically mentions using his son's personal relationship with you to facilitate the acquisition. Ms. Blake, are you still there? Catherine hung up without answering. Her hands shook as she pulled up TechCrunch's website, where the leaked documents were already published in devastating detail. There, in corporate language cold as winter, was her entire relationship with Julian reduced to a business strategy. Every dinner, every kiss, every vulnerable moment she'd shared, all of it cataloged as intelligence gathering. The elevator dinged, and Julian stepped out, his face desperate and pale. Catherine, I can explain. Explain? She laughed, a sound sharp enough to cut. Explain how you turned me into a case study? How you documented my company's weaknesses during pillow talk? That's not what happened. Then what did happen, Julian? She stood behind her desk like it was a shield. Because I just read your father's emails. I saw the presentations with my financial data I never shared with you officially. Julian's face crumpled. I was supposed to, yes. But I never. Everything between us was real, Catherine. Everything. Real? Catherine's voice rose, years of suppressed fury finally breaking free. Our entire relationship was a corporate espionage operation. You played me like a violin while your father planned to gut my company. I was trying to protect you. By lying to me for months? By pretending to care while gathering ammunition? Tears of rage burned her eyes. You want to know the worst part? I actually fell for you. I thought you saw me as more than a business opportunity. I do see you. Get out! Catherine screamed, her composure finally shattering completely. Get out before I call security. Get out before I do something we'll both regret. Julian took a step forward, his hand extended like he might touch her. Catherine, please. I said get out. She grabbed her coffee mug and hurled it at the wall beside his head, ceramic exploding in a shower of fragments. I never want to see you again. I never want to hear your name. You destroyed everything, my company, my trust, my... She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't admit how thoroughly he'd devastated her heart. Julian stood there for another moment, memorizing her face, then turned and walked away. The elevator doors closed behind him like the ending of everything they'd almost been. The story broke everywhere within hours. Tech heiress played by corporate prince. Love as warfare. Inside Silicon Alley's biggest betrayal. Blake Analytics targeted an elaborate romance scam. Catherine's phone rang incessantly. Reporters, competitors offering support. Vultures circling the wounded company. Blake Analytics' stock price plummeted as investors fled, spooked by the suggestion that their CEO had been manipulated by a corporate rival. 3 major clients just pulled their contracts, Sarah reported grimly. They're citing concerns about data security and professional judgment. Catherine stared out her office window at the city that had once seemed full of possibility. Now it felt like a trap. Every building a reminder of Julian's betrayal. How long do we have? 6 weeks. Maybe 8 if we liquidate everything non-essential. Meanwhile, Julian was discovering the cost of his rebellion. Richard Hartley had moved quickly, freezing Julian's trust fund, removing him from all corporate accounts, even having security escort him from his penthouse apartment. You chose that woman over your family, Richard said during their final confrontation. Over everything I built for you. I chose integrity over profit, Julian replied. Something you taught me was impossible. Integrity doesn't pay rent, son, and that woman will never forgive you for this. Julian knew his father was right about Catherine, but it didn't matter. He'd rather lose everything than continue living a lie. He took a job with a small nonprofit startup in London, helping developing nations build technological infrastructure. The pay was barely enough to cover a studio apartment, but it was honest work. Both Catherine and Julian became cautionary tales in tech circles. She, the brilliant CEO who let emotion cloud business judgment. He, the heir who threw away billions for love. Neither read the articles about the other, but both wondered in their darkest moments if they'd ever feel whole again. The city they'd once shared felt haunted by their absence from each other's lives. Every restaurant held memories. Every rooftop view reminded them of what they'd lost. Love, as it turned out, left scars even when it was built on lies. 6 months later, Catherine stood in her new office, smaller, less prestigious, but entirely hers. Blake Analytics had survived by shedding everything non-essential. The Manhattan headquarters, half the staff, and most of her pride. They operated now from a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, scrappy and hungry in a way that reminded Catherine why she'd started the company in the first place. The Morrison Group wants to discuss a partnership, Sarah said, reviewing the morning's emails. And we got that government contract for election security algorithms. Catherine nodded, barely listening. Success felt hollow when achieved alone. She'd thrown herself into rebuilding with manic intensity, working 18-hour days to avoid the quiet moments when she might remember gray eyes and gentle hands and the way Julian had made her feel like she could conquer the world. Her team was loyal, but careful around her now, treating her like expensive glass that might shatter at any sudden movement. She'd become the ice queen of Brooklyn tech, brilliant but untouchable. 3,000 miles away, Julian was learning that poverty was surprisingly liberating. His London flat was the size of his former walk-in closet, but it was clean and bright and entirely his own. He worked for TechBridge International, helping rural communities in Kenya build internet infrastructure. "You're different," his colleague Priya observed over cheap pub food. "When you first arrived, you looked like someone had died. Now you just look tired." Julian managed a smile. Maybe someone did die. The person I used to be. He'd grown a beard, traded designer suits for field gear, and discovered he was good at work that actually mattered. But late at night, when London rain drummed against his windows, he still reached for his phone to text Catherine before remembering she'd blocked his number months ago. Both had learned to function without the other, but functioning wasn't the same as living. The invitation arrived on expensive cardstock. "You are cordially invited to speak at the annual Women in Technology Summit. Theme: Resilience in the face of adversity." Catherine almost threw it away. The last thing she wanted was to become a poster child for romantic failure in business. But Sarah convinced her otherwise. "You rebuilt the company from nothing," her sister argued. "Twice. That's a story worth telling." So Catherine found herself backstage at the Javits Center, smoothing her black dress and rehearsing talking points that carefully avoided mentioning Julian by name. The betrayal had become learning to trust her instincts. The devastation was discovering her own strength. "Our keynote speaker needs no introduction," the moderator announced. "Please welcome Julian Hartley, CEO of TechBridge International." Catherine's blood turned to ice. Julian. Here. She hadn't seen him in 6 months. Hadn't even known he was back in the country. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she was trapped backstage, forced to watch as he walked onto the stage. He looked different. Leaner. Rougher around the edges. His expensive polish replaced by something more authentic. The Julian she'd known had been a beautiful sculpture. This man was carved from harder stone. "When I stood in this city last year," Julian began, his voice carrying across the packed auditorium, "I thought success meant winning at any cost. I thought love was a weakness, and integrity was a luxury I couldn't afford." Catherine's hands clenched into fists. How dare he talk about love here in front of all these people? "I was wrong about everything that mattered," Julian continued. "I hurt someone I cared about because I was too cowardly to choose her over my father's approval. I lost the best thing that ever happened to me because I thought I could build happiness on a foundation of lies." The audience was riveted, hanging on every word. Catherine felt exposed, certain everyone was looking at her, connecting Julian's words to the gossip they'd all read. "The technology we build should serve human connection, not replace it," Julian said, his eyes seeming to find her in the wings. "Innovation without integrity is just sophisticated destruction. And love, real love, requires the courage to be vulnerable, to choose truth even when it costs everything." When he finished, the applause was thunderous. Catherine remained frozen backstage, her heart pounding against her ribs. This wasn't the man who'd deceived her. This was someone she'd never met. Humbled, honest, speaking truths that cut to the bone. "Ms. Blake?" A production assistant touched her arm. "You're on in 5 minutes." Catherine looked out at the audience, then at Julian collecting his things at the podium. For 6 months, she'd built walls around her heart. Now seeing him like this, vulnerable and real in a way he'd never been before, those walls felt suddenly fragile. She could walk away, deliver her speech, avoid him entirely, maintain the safe distance she'd built, or she could finally get the answers she'd never allowed him to give. As Julian exited stage left, Catherine made a choice that terrified her. She followed him. "Julian, wait." He turned in the corridor outside the auditorium, his face cycling through surprise, hope, and careful neutrality. Up close, the changes were even more pronounced. Lines around his eyes that spoke of hard-won wisdom, hands roughened by real work instead of manicured for boardrooms. "Catherine." Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. "I didn't know you'd be here." "Neither did I." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. That speech was the truth. His voice was quiet, steady, all of it. They stood there in the bustling corridor, an island of stillness, while conference attendees streamed around them. Catherine had imagined this moment countless times, but she'd never expected to feel this confused, this torn between anger and something dangerously close to forgiveness. "You look," Julian started, then stopped himself. "Different?" Catherine supplied. "Harder? More suspicious of charming men bearing gifts?" A rueful smile touched his lips. "I was going to say beautiful, but yes, harder too. You've built walls I can see from here. Walls keep people safe. They also keep people alone. The simple truth of it hit Catherine like a physical blow. She had been alone, not just romantically, but spiritually, emotionally. She'd built Blake Analytics into a fortress, where she could control every variable, except the ache in her chest that never quite went away. "I need to ask you something," Catherine said suddenly. "That night at my apartment, when you told me about your father's expectations, was any of that real?" Julian's face went very still. All of it. The pressure, the need to prove myself, the feeling of being trapped in someone else's vision of my life. That was all real. "But you were still planning to acquire my company." "Yes." No hesitation. No attempt to soften the blow. "I was following my father's plan, until I started falling for you, and then I didn't know how to stop without losing everything I thought I wanted." Catherine absorbed this, studying his face for signs of deception. "When did you decide to choose me over the acquisition?" "The night you told me about your parents cleaning offices," Julian said quietly. "You talked about watching through those windows, dreaming of being inside. I realized I'd been handed everything you'd fought for, and I was about to destroy it for my father's approval." He paused. "That's when I knew I couldn't go through with it. But I also knew telling you would mean losing you. So you chose to lie instead." "I chose to be a coward," Julian corrected. "I thought I could find a third option, some way to protect you and keep you. I was wrong." Catherine felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of the knot she'd carried for months. "I need you to know something too," she said slowly. "I wasn't entirely honest either." Julian's eyebrows rose. "What do you mean?" "I knew you were interested in acquiring companies. I researched you after we met." The admission felt like swallowing glass. "I thought I could use your attraction to me to secure better terms for Blake Analytics, or at least learn what you were planning." The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of mutual confession. "So we were both using each other," Julian said finally. "In the beginning, yes." Catherine's voice was barely a whisper, but somewhere between the first lie and the last kiss, it became real for me, terrifyingly real. "For me too," Julian said, "which is why losing you felt like losing everything that mattered." They talked for an hour in that corridor, then moved to a quiet coffee shop nearby, then to Central Park as the sun began to set. Months of accumulated hurt and misunderstanding slowly unwound as they shared the truth they'd been too afraid to speak before. Julian told her about the nonprofit work that had given his life meaning, about learning to value impact over income. Catherine described rebuilding Blake Analytics from scratch, discovering she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. "I have something to show you," Julian said as they sat by the reservoir, watching joggers circle the path. He pulled out his phone and showed her a business plan. "TechBridge wants to expand into domestic markets. We're looking for a data analytics partner." Catherine's heart stuttered. "Julian." "It's not charity," he said quickly. "Your algorithms could revolutionize how we identify underserved communities for technology deployment. It's a genuine partnership that would benefit both organizations." She studied the proposal, her business mind automatically calculating potential revenue streams and growth opportunities. It was solid, ethical work that could provide Blake Analytics with stable income while serving a greater purpose. "This is what you're building now?" she asked. "Instead of acquiring companies, you're creating partnerships?" "I learned from the best," Julian said, his eyes meeting hers. "A brilliant CEO who showed me that real success means lifting others up, not tearing them down." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. "You can't fix what happened between us with a business proposal." "I'm not trying to," Julian said softly. "I'm trying to show you who I became after I lost you, the man I should have been when we met." A jogger ran past, earbuds in, completely absorbed in her own world. Catherine envied her simplicity, her ability to focus on just putting one foot in front of the other. "I don't know if I can trust you again," Catherine admitted. "I don't know if I can trust anyone that way again." "I understand," Julian said. "Trust has to be earned, not demanded. But Catherine, what if we started over? Not as CEO and heir, not as adversaries pretending to be allies. Just as Julian and Catherine, two people who care about using technology to make the world better." Catherine looked at him. Really looked. The expensive watch was gone, replaced by a simple fitness tracker. His shoes were comfortable rather than fashionable. Everything about him suggested a man who'd learned to value substance over style. "I'd need time," she said finally. "And absolute transparency. No corporate secrets, no family pressure, no hidden agendas." Complete honesty, Julian agreed, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. Catherine stood, brushing off her dress. I need to think about the business proposal separately from whatever this is. Julian stood too, hope flickering in his eyes. And what is this? Catherine allowed herself a small smile. A conversation I should have let you have 6 months ago. As they walked back toward the conference center, Catherine felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Possibility, not certainty. That would take time to rebuild. But the tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, love could survive even the worst betrayals if both people were willing to choose truth over comfort. Julian, she said, as they reached the subway entrance. Yes? That speech you gave, about choosing courage over comfort. Did you mean it? Every word. Catherine nodded, her decision crystallizing. Then let's find out if we're both brave enough to try again. 3 weeks later, Catherine stood in an empty warehouse in Queens, surveying the raw space with an architect and contractor. Exposed brick walls, soaring ceilings, and windows that flooded the room with natural light. It was perfect for what she had in mind. The tech infrastructure will need to be built from scratch, the contractor was saying, but the bones are solid. When do you need it finished? 6 weeks, Catherine replied, ignoring his shocked expression. Money is no object, but time is everything. Her phone buzzed with a text from Julian. Dinner tonight? I have news about the Kenya project. Catherine smiled, typing back. Rain check. I'm busy changing everything. They'd been taking it slow. Coffee meetings to discuss the TechBridge partnership. Careful dinners where they talked about work and dreams and everything, except the electric tension that sparked between them whenever their hands accidentally touched. Both were being cautious, building trust, brick by careful brick. But Catherine was tired of careful. Life was too short for half measures and missed opportunities. She pulled up Julian's contact information and called instead of texting. Julian, it's me. Can you meet me tomorrow night? I have something to show you. Is everything all right? You sound different. Everything's about to be, Catherine said, her heart pounding with excitement and terror. Just trust me. One more time. The next evening, Julian arrived at the address Catherine had sent him. A nondescript warehouse in an industrial part of Queens. The neighborhood was gentrifying slowly, young artists and tech startups moving into converted factory spaces. Catherine was waiting outside, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual business attire. She looked nervous and excited and absolutely beautiful. What is this place? Julian asked, following her to a side entrance. Our future, Catherine said simply, then caught herself. I mean, potentially our future. If you want it. She led him inside to a space that took his breath away. The warehouse had been transformed into a state-of-the-art workspace, with gleaming tech stations arranged around collaborative areas. Floor-to-ceiling whiteboards covered one wall, already filled with algorithms and project timelines. But what caught his attention was the sign hanging above the main workspace. Blake Hartley Social Impact Technologies. Julian stared at the sign, then at Catherine. What did you do? I bought this place, Catherine said, her words coming fast with nervousness. I liquidated my personal investments, sold my apartment, used everything I had saved. This is going to be our joint venture, Blake Analytics and TechBridge, working together to create technology solutions for social good. Catherine, I know it's crazy, she continued, not letting him interrupt. I know we're still figuring things out between us, but I realized something these past few weeks. I don't want to just rebuild my old life. I want to build something new, something better, and I want to build it with you. Julian walked deeper into the space, touching the equipment, reading the project outlines on the whiteboards. It was everything he'd dreamed of but never thought possible. Cutting-edge technology in service of human connection, profit balanced with purpose. This must have cost a fortune, he said finally. Everything I had, Catherine confirmed. Which brings me to the second part. She took a deep breath. I'm not asking you to be my business partner because I'm in love with you. I'm asking because you're the best person for the job. But Julian, I am in love with you. Completely, terrifyingly in love with you. Julian turned to face her, his expression unreadable. Catherine, I know you probably think I'm crazy for risking everything again, she rushed on. But I'd rather fail spectacularly trying to build something amazing with you than succeed safely on my own. I choose you, Julian. I choose us. I choose the chance that love can be stronger than fear." For a long moment, Julian just stared at her. Then he began to laugh, not mockingly, but with pure, delighted amazement. "You magnificent, impossible woman," he said, crossing the space between them in 3 long strides. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" "Probably destroyed my financial security and emotional equilibrium," Catherine admitted, suddenly uncertain. Was that wrong? Instead of answering, Julian cupped her face in his hands and kissed her with 6 months of accumulated longing. Catherine melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as he pulled her closer. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "I've loved you since that first night on your rooftop. I loved you through every lie and mistake and moment of stupidity. I love your brilliant mind and your fierce heart, and the way you make me want to be better than I ever thought I could be." "Is that a yes to the partnership?" Catherine asked breathlessly. "That's a yes to everything," Julian said, spinning her around until she laughed. "Yes to the business. Yes to this insane, wonderful leap of faith. Yes to building something beautiful together." When he set her down, Catherine felt lighter than she had in months. "There's one more thing," she said, reaching into her bag. "I had this made." She handed him a small velvet box. Inside was a simple silver band engraved with coordinates. "The location where we first kissed," Catherine explained as Julian's eyes widened. "I know it's unconventional for the woman to propose to the man." "Yes," Julian interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. "I haven't asked the question yet." "You don't need to." He slipped the ring onto his finger, then pulled her close again. "Yes to forever. Yes to matching rings and joint bank accounts and fighting about whose turn it is to do dishes. Yes to building an empire together and growing old together and never lying to each other again, even when the truth is inconvenient. Especially then." Julian's smile was radiant. "No more lies between us, Catherine. Only truth, from now until forever." As they kissed again in their new workspace, surrounded by the dreams they'd build together, both of them understood that this was what real love looked like, not the desperate passion of their first encounter, but the steady choice to trust, to forgive, to build something lasting together. Outside, Queens buzzed with possibility. Inside, 2 people who'd lost everything had found something worth more than all the companies and fortunes in the world: each other. 1 year later, Catherine stood before a packed auditorium at the same tech conference where she and Julian had found each other again. This time, they were presenting together the success story of Blake Hartley Social Impact Technologies, which had already deployed internet infrastructure to 12 underserved communities and developed algorithms that had improved educational outcomes for thousands of students. "People ask us how we went from adversaries to partners," Catherine said, her hand briefly touching Julian's as they shared the podium. "The truth is, we had to learn to be honest with ourselves before we could be honest with each other." Julian picked up the thread. "Corporate culture teaches us that vulnerability is weakness, that emotional intelligence is less valuable than market intelligence. We've learned that the opposite is true. The most successful partnerships, in business and in life, are built on radical honesty and genuine care for each other's success." In the audience, Richard Hartley sat in the back row, his expression unreadable. After Julian's public rejection of the family business, father and son had been estranged for months. But when Blake Hartley's first quarterly report showed both profit and measurable social impact, Richard had quietly reached out. "I may not understand your choices," he'd told Julian over an awkward lunch, "but I can't argue with your results. You've built something that matters." It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a beginning. Catherine's parents had flown in from Ohio for the presentation, their faces glowing with pride as they watched their daughter command the stage. Her mother still couldn't quite believe that the little girl who'd pressed her nose against office building windows was now revolutionizing how technology served communities. "The most important lesson we've learned," Catherine continued, "is that love, whether romantic, familial, or professional, isn't a distraction from success. It's the foundation that makes success meaningful." After the presentation, Catherine and Julian escaped to the building's rooftop garden, their favorite place for important conversations. The Manhattan skyline glittered around them, but Catherine only had eyes for the man beside her. "Remember when you said some mistakes are worth making?" she asked, settling into his arms. "You mean our entire relationship?" Julian teased, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Were we really a mistake?" Julian considered this seriously. I think the lies were mistakes. The hiding, the deception, the way we hurt each other, those were mistakes. But finding you, falling for you, choosing to fight for us, those weren't mistakes. Those were the best decisions I ever made. Catherine twisted in his arms to face him. Even though it cost you your inheritance, your family's approval? Catherine Blake Hartley, Julian said solemnly, you are worth more than all the Hartley money combined. You're worth more than my father's approval, or society's expectations, or any life I could have built without you. Blake Hartley? Catherine raised an eyebrow. Pretty presumptuous, considering we haven't actually planned a wedding yet. Haven't we? Julian pulled out his phone and showed her his calendar. Saturday, May 15th. Small ceremony, close friends and family. Reception in the warehouse where you proposed to me. Catherine laughed, delighted by his confidence. You scheduled our wedding without asking me? I figured if you were brave enough to risk everything on us once, you might be willing to do it again. As if on cue, fireworks began exploding over the Hudson River, some celebration or event that painted the sky in brilliant colors. Catherine and Julian watched in comfortable silence, both understanding that they'd already seen the most beautiful sight either would ever witness, a love strong enough to survive the worst betrayals and patient enough to rebuild from ashes. Julian? Catherine said softly. It wasn't a merger of companies that brought us together. No. He smiled, already knowing where she was going with this. Catherine stood on her tiptoes to kiss him, her words whispered against his lips. It was a merger of souls. In the distance, the city hummed with ambition and dreams, and the endless pursuit of more. But on that rooftop, two people who'd learned the difference between having everything and having what mattered held each other close and planned a future built on the only currency that ever really counted: absolute, honest, unconditional love. The lies that had brought them together were long buried. The truth they'd built in their place would last forever. Your heart knows the way. Subscribe and follow the beauty.